Measure passes. File item 80, pass and retain. Moving to file item 81, that's AB 159. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 159 by Assemblymember Calderon and others, enacting to drugs and devices.
Mr. Calderon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. AB 159 allows eligible patients with a terminal illness to seek investigational drugs and treatments under the supervision of a physician in order to try and save their own lives. This bill requires written, informed consent be given by patients, institutional review board oversight of physician recommendations, and biannual reports to the Department of Public Health in order to ensure safety for both patients and physicians. AB 159 is simple. If your parent, your child, or even yourself are faced with a terminal illness, you have the right to try and save your own life. AB 159 passed out of the Health Committee, Business and Professions Committee, as well as the Appropriations Committee without a single no vote. This is a simple measure, but does a lot of great things for a lot of amazing people in this state, and I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Ms. Waldron, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise as a co-author of this measure. It emphasizes personal choice under which a terminally ill individual who has no other options has the fundamental right to receive experimental medicines and devices via expanded access with the knowledge of potential unknown consequences. AB 159 simply seeks to allow terminally ill patients the right to pursue non-FDA approved medications in the hope of saving their life when they've basically been given the no other option by their doctor. It doesn't mandate they'll receive it. It just allows them to try to get it. I urge an aye vote.
Thank you, Ms. Waldron. Mr. Cooley, you're recognized.
Colleagues, I'm pleased to rise in support of AB 159. I actually know of two young women, good friends of my daughter-in-law. One died of ovarian cancer. The other had another type of pancreatic cancer. In each case, they were looking for whatever help might have helped them. One of them had a husband, 3 kids that she left behind. And so faced with that sort of diagnosis and limited prospects, the search for anything that might help is not a theoretical inquiry. It affects persons, families, friends. She struggled for months kind of going through different hoops looking for assistance. So I'm pleased to support this bill today, Mr. Calderon.
All debate having ceased, Mr. Calderon, you may close. I'm sorry, Mr. Calderon. Mr. Allen, you are recognized.
I'd just like to rise very briefly and offer my full support of this measure. I think this is very forward-looking. I think this is a long time coming, and I'd like to applaud the author for his courage to bring this forward for everyone out there. Thank you so much.
Mr. Calderon, is there any other discussion? Mr. Calderon, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members, and I want to thank my colleagues for their kind words. I really believe in this legislation and respectfully ask for your aye vote today.
With that, the clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the vote. Ayes 69, noes 2. Measure passes. File item 82, pass and retain. File item 83, that's AB 601. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 601 by Assemblymember Eggman and others, enacting to health facilities.
Ms. Eggman, you may open.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, AB 601 is a consumer protection bill that will provide more transparency of residential care facilities for the elderly, known as RCFEs. As you all may have heard, we do have a silver tsunami coming, and this bill will help to protect our seniors in their final years of residence. As you probably remember, last year the owner of Valley Springs Manor in Castro Valley abandoned 19 RCFE residents, leaving the cook and the janitor to care for them. It later turned out that she had a history of hundreds of thousands of dollars in fines owed to the federal and state licensing agencies for different nursing homes she owned in California. This bill will prevent individuals and corporations with a history of noncompliance from opening new facilities in the state by asking the Department of Social Services to cross-reference these and by establishing further to their website where people can be able to go on the Department of Social Services website and see what people have owned, what allegations they've had against them, what things they've been out of compliance, and make good decisions about where their loved ones go in their final years of life. I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Thank you, Ms. Eggman. Mr. Mays, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I must reluctantly rise in opposition to AB 601. As Vice Chair of Human Services Committee, I supported AB 601 because I support the goals of the bill, and I have a great regard for the author. State departments should absolutely be able to cross-check applications for residential care facilities for the elderly to ensure that operators with unresolved histories of abuses are not allowed to open new facilities. Consumers should absolutely be able to do some of this research themselves on the internet, preventing lengthy drives into government offices. If it is found that a facility's application made a significant false statement, the license should absolutely be revoked. Unfortunately, the bill before us is potentially unworkable. Several terms are vague or overly broad, and the disclosure requirements could cause the application process to exceed 5 years. I supported AB 601 in committee because stakeholders were working actively on amendments, but they have not materialized. I fear that if this bill passes, the only applicants that could comply with its requirements are those with no previous experience running these facilities, since they would haven't had anything to disclose. The risk is just too high. For these reasons, I urge a no vote.
Ms. Brown, you are recognized from your desk.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to vote aye on this measure and ask everyone to vote aye. If you see some of the things that have happened to our seniors, you know that this is a good bill. You know that this is a more complex and opportunities for providers are there, but people can abuse the system. That's what we found with the agency or that my colleague is speaking about. I think everyone should vote aye on this bill.
Seeing no further discussion, Mr. Thurman. Members, if you'd like to be recognized, please raise your microphones during debate. Mr. Thurman, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. And I just simply wanted to rise in support of AB 601. As a social worker for many years, I've visited assisted living facilities, and I can tell you that while we hope that our systems can catch it when there are operators who don't always put the residents' best heart in mind, it just doesn't always work that way. And the reality is that sometimes we don't find out about abuses that are taking place until it's been too late and individuals have been hurt and sometimes worse, killed. And so for that simple reason, I appreciate the author for bringing this forward, and I would respectfully ask my colleagues to give it an aye vote.
All debate having ceased, Ms. Eggman, you may close.
I think my colleagues, all who spoke on this important issue, and I certainly respect the minority party's position that regulation is not a good thing, but certainly it is our duty and obligation to be able to protect our seniors as well as our children, and we have plenty of evidence of abuse because regulation has not been in place, and this simply brings things in line. We continue to work with the department, and I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Thank you, Ms. Eggman. With that, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll. Tie the vote. Ayes 61, no 7. Measure passes. File items 84 through 87. Pass and retain. Moving to file item 88. That's AB 1017 for the purpose of amendment. Clerk will read with amendments.
Assembly Bill 1017 with amendments by Assembly Member Campos.
Ms. Campos, you may open on the amendments.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to take up AB 1017 for the purpose of amendments. The amendments would remove the requirement that employers must disclose an advertised position minimum pay, and this amendment also adds Assemblymember Cristina Garcia and Lorena Gonzalez as co-authors, and I will continue to work with anyone that is interested in this bill. I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Thank you, Ms. Campos. Ms. Waldron, you are recognized.
We are without objection on the amendments.
Thank you, Ms. Waldron. With that, we may take a voice vote on the amendments. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed say nay. The ayes have it. The amendments are adopted. Bill is out to print and back on file. File item 89, pass and retain. Moving to file item 90. That's AB 1083. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 1083 by Assemblymember Eggman, an act relating to the Political Reform Act of 1974.
Ms. Eggman, you may open.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. AB 1083 is a very small district bill which will amend the Political Reform Act of 1974 in order to authorize the Fair Political Practices Commission to enter into a mutual agreement with the City of Stockton to enforce locally adopted campaign finance or ordinances. I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Thank you, Ms. Eggman. Mr. Mays, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I am pleased to rise in support of AB 1083, which would allow the City of Stockton to contract out with the Fair Political Practices Commission. As some of you might know, I was the Chief of Staff to a county supervisor in San Bernardino County before coming to the Assembly. And one of the things that we had worked on was campaign finance reform within the county. During the 2000s, there was some corruption that was occurring. It was unfortunate, but it was occurring. And we spent over a year looking at the possibilities of what we could do to be able to combat some of that corruption. One of the things that we looked at was whether to come up with a local ethics commission or to come up with some other enforcement agency. And after looking at it and studying it back in 2012, we had gotten a bill passed through here in this body to come up with contracting, having the County of San Bernardino contract with the FPPC. It's quite an elegant solution, and I urge an aye vote.
Thank you, Mr. Mays. Ms. Ridley Thomas, you are recognized.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, members, I unfortunately rise in opposition to AB 1083. With respect to the author's intent, I think this is a good idea in general to provide ethics and oversight. These mechanisms are really with the local district attorney and city attorney. That's why in the Elections Committee I expressed this perspective and voted no, and will respectfully request a no vote by this body. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Seeing no further discussion or debate on this item, Ms. Eggman, you may close.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I thank my colleague from San Bernardino for speaking on all of my bills today so elegantly, and I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Thank you, Ms. Eggman. With that, the clerk will open the roll. All members vote or desire to vote. Members, this is a 54-vote bill. All members vote or desire to vote. The clerk will close the roll. Tally the vote. Ayes 71, noes 2. Measure passes. File items 91 and 92 pass and retain. Moving to file item 93, that's AB 1153. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 1153 by Assemblymember Calderon, an act relating to school accountability.
Mr. Calderon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. AB 1153 requires the State Board of Education to consider revisions needed to monitor progress on the state priorities in the Local Control Accountability Plan, better known as LCAP. This bill also requires school districts and county superintendents to post their respective populated evaluation rubric on their websites if it is available. AB 1153 addresses a technical issue needed to monitor outcomes and will also enable more meaningful dialogue to occur on specific LCAP goals. This bill passed out of committee with bipartisan support without any no votes. I respectfully ask for an aye vote.
Thank you, Mr. Calderon. Seeing no discussion or debate on this item, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll. Tally the vote. Ayes 74, no 0. Measure passes. File items 94 through 97 pass and retain. File item 98, that's AB 1390 for the purpose of amendment. Clerk will read with amendments.
Assembly Bill 1390 with amendments by Assemblymember Alejo.
Mr. Alejo, you may open on the amendments.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, today I'm presenting amendments on AB 1390, which creates a streamlined process for the adjudication of water rights. These amendments make non-substantive changes and add co-authors. I respectfully request the bill be put out to print and back on file.
Thank you, Mr. Alejo. Seeing no discussion or debate on this item, without objection, we may take a voice vote on the amendments. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed say nay. The ayes have it. The amendments are adopted. Bill is out to print and back on file. File item 99, AB 1537. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 1537 by the Committee on Jobs, Economic Development, and the Economy, and act relating to business, making appropriation therefore.
Mr. Eduardo Garcia, you may open.
Mr. Speaker, members, AB 1537 is a committee bill that expands the type of information being reported on financial assistance provided through the Small Business Finance Center. There is no known opposition. I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Thank you, Ms. Garcia. I'm seeing no discussion or debate on this item. The clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll. Tally the vote. Ayes 75, no 0. Measure passes. So that was an urgency. So there was no urgency on that? It's just 2/3 now? Okay. Moving to file item 100, that's AB 316. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 316 by Assemblymember Mainshine, an act relating to veterinarians.
Mr. Mainshine, you may open.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And members, large-scale animal cruelty cases like animal fighting and hoarding create unexpected financial hardships on the authorities maintaining the animals. Unlike other investigations, such as drugs, animals are an expensive piece of evidence requiring care, food, and attention. The ASPCA estimates the average animal cruelty case consists of 461 animals at a cost of $26 per animal per day. The average case lasts around 45 days, leading to an average cost exceeding $500,000 to care for these animals. AB 316 clarifies existing law by establishing that when a law enforcement agency, animal control department, or a humane officer requests the assistance of vets licensed in other states to assist during a cruelty case, that temporary shelter facilities can be utilized. And I would thank you very much, Mr. Speaker and members. I'd respectfully request an aye vote.
See no discussion or debate on this item. The clerk will open the roll. All members vote or desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote or desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll. Tally the vote. Ayes 72, no 0. Measure passes. File item 101. That's AB 317. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 317 by Assemblymember Mainshine, an act relating to veterinary medicine.
Mr. Mainshine, you may again open.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. States can be overwhelmed when impacted by disaster, as seen in the wake of Hurricane Katrina in Louisiana and Hurricane Sandy in New York and New Jersey. The need for temporary shelters was made clear in the Gulf states, and it was shown again both in 2005 and again in 2011. This displaced thousands of people and pets, caused nearly 300 deaths, and plunged parts of the United States into darkness for weeks. Current California law permits the state to call on vets from other states during state-declared emergencies, but it's unclear whether those vets are permitted to establish temporary shelters to house displaced animals. AB 317 is a crucial step towards ensuring the well-being of California's residents, pets, and animals in the wake of a natural disaster. I respectfully request an aye vote.
Thank you, Mr. Mainshine. Seeing no discussion or debate on this item, the clerk will open the roll. All members vote or desire to vote. All members vote or desire to vote. All members vote or desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll. Tally the vote. Ayes 73, no 0. Measure passes. File items 102 through 104 pass and retain. Moving to the consent calendar. Members, does any member wish to remove an item from the consent calendar? Seeing and hearing none, the clerk will read the second-day consent calendar.
Assembly Bill 289 by Assemblymember Melendez, an act relating to the legislature.
With that, the clerk will open the roll on the consent calendar. All members vote or desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll. Tally the vote. Ayes 74, no 0. Consent calendar is adopted. The clerk will read the remaining bills on the second-day consent calendar.
Assembly Bill 1525.
Ayes 74, no 0.
Assembly Bill 1085.
Ayes 74, no 0.
Colleagues, at this point, we'll move to announcements and adjournments in memory. We have a number of colleagues who have been granted prior permission to speak on an adjourn in memory. I'd like to recognize our first colleague, Mr. Bloom. You are recognized at your desk.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I rise to adjourn in the memory of Chris Burden, a Topanga Canyon resident and well-known artist around the world for his performance art, sculpture, and installation art. He passed away on May 10th. Born in Boston, Chris Burden grew up in Cambridge, Massachusetts, France, and Italy, and at the age of 12 was badly injured in a scooter accident and spent many months recovering. It was during that time that Burden first became fascinated with visual arts, particularly photography. He began his work in performance art in the early 70s, where he made a number of very controversial performances that incorporated the idea of personal danger in his expression. Some of his most famous works during that time were Shoot, where he had an assistant shoot him with a .22 caliber rifle, and Transfixed, yeah, I know, where he had his hands nailed to the hood of a car. But by the late 70s, he began working on engineered sculptural installation art, and during this time, he created the B-car, a four-wheel vehicle he created that could travel 100 miles an hour and achieve 100 miles per gallon. Much of his later work focused on sculptures and structures. One famous example was his Tale of Two Cities, which he created in 1981. It incorporated 5,000 war toys from the United States, Japan, and Europe. And he placed these toys on a 1,100 square foot, 20-ton sand base surrounded by houseplants to mimic a jungle. But in 2008, Burden created perhaps his most well-known work. I think you've all seen it. It's called Urban Lights, and it is consisting of 202 antique street lights that he collected that once stood around Los Angeles. This is at the front of the Los Angeles County Museum of Art. It's an iconic piece. His most recent work of art, which was completed before he passed away, just opened at LACMA, and the LA Times reviewed it very favorably in this morning's paper. His work has been displayed all over the world, from Newport Beach in Los Angeles to Chicago, New York, London, Vienna, Belgium, and Japan. And many of these pieces can be seen today at LACMA in Los Angeles. Chris Burden studied visual arts, physics, and architecture at Pomona College and received a Master's of Fine Art degree from the University of California at Irvine. He maintained his studio in Topanga Canyon until he passed away earlier this month at the age of 69, and I ask that the Assembly join me in adjourning in his memory.
Thank you, Mr. Bloom. Our next colleague to be recognized for an adjourn in memory is Mr. Mullen.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Members, today I ask the Assembly adjourn in the memory of Bob St. Clair. Nicknamed the Geek, Bob St. Clair played for the San Francisco 49ers in 1953 and played his entire career in San Francisco until his retirement prior to the 1964 season. Bob was inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame in 1990. His son, Greg, knew my fondness for the man I called the Hall of Famer and was kind enough to gift me with an autographed 49ers jersey with St. Clair's number 79 proudly displayed. His jersey is a steady reminder of not only his athletic prowess, but also his role in San Mateo County's history. While still playing football, Bob St. Clair served as mayor of Daly City from 1958 to 1961. He then served as a county supervisor for San Mateo County from 1966 to 1974. He will be greatly missed by the community, and I join Assemblymember Gordon in respectfully asking the Assembly adjourn in his memory today. Thank you.
I'd like to recognize Mr. Gordon.
Thank you. I will join my colleague from South San Francisco in asking that we adjourn in memory of Bob St. Clair. Bob played all of his games in Kezar Stadium, an iconic place in San Francisco. He went to high school right across the street at Polytechnic High, and in those days, the 49ers played at Kezar Stadium. Today, the field at Kezar Stadium is named after Bob St. Clair. I think one of the most important things to know about this man is what he did as part of a team in 1951. In 1951, Bob St. Clair was playing for the University of San Francisco Dons football team. It was a team that went 9-0. In fact, it was a team that had 9 future NFL players on it. And this college team also produced 3 Pro Football Hall of Famers. And because of their 9-0 record, they were invited to go to the Orange Bowl in 1951. But they took a vote and declined to go to the Orange Bowl in 1951 because they had been advised that 2 of their players, who were African American, would not be allowed to play in the Orange Bowl. Now, the USF football team was in dire straits at that time. And in fact, they needed the money, the income from the Orange Bowl, in order to guarantee that they would have another year of football at USF. And so when the team voted to not go to the Orange Bowl in support of the 2 African American players, they essentially voted to eliminate football at the University of San Francisco. Bob St. Clair was an amazing man who was a part of that important decision, and I think it speaks a lot for his character. He retired to Santa Rosa after his service in local government, as has been described. He's survived by 6 children and his 3rd wife. We ask that all of us keep Bob and his spirit in our memory. Thank you.
Our next adjourned memory will be provided by our colleague from San Diego, Dr. Weber.
Mr. Speaker and members, I too rise today and request very humbly that we adjourn in memory of Dr. Tamil, often called Shekinah Porter. I stand on behalf of myself as her former faculty member, her professor, and her colleague, who was a student friend of hers, Mr. Holden. Tamil passed away in May of this year, May 8th, from breast cancer. Young woman full of life and love for life. She was born in Muskogee, Oklahoma, the second child in a family of 3, who immediately became the leader of that pack in terms of her 2 brothers and herself. They moved to Pasadena, where she attended school in Altadena in Pasadena and graduated from Muir High School. I met her in 1976 when she came to San Diego State University. A 6-foot-tall, proud, forward-looking young woman who, when she stretched her arms, they were over 6 feet long, and she graced our campus with a style that will always be memorable after 30, 40 years. She was a leader in every sense of the word. Tamil became the first woman to actually chair our African Student Council on the campus. She was one of our few students who actually chaired and participated in the first Black baccalaureate service at San Diego State. She founded our Association of African American Studies majors and minors. And unlike so many other students, she graduated in 4 years as a scholar. She then went on to become a professor because she attended the California School of Professional Psychology. And I had the pleasure of not only being her freshman professor, but serving on her doctoral committee as she wrote her dissertation about dance and psychology. She was a brilliant young woman who embraced so many challenges in life and taught us so much. She not only was a professor in terms of working at San Diego State University and many other colleges, but she became the director of counseling at places like Whittier, USC, Cal State Stanislaus, and so many other campuses in the Southern California area. She always had a great smile, great task, and if you saw me perform Phenomenal Woman, it was because Tamil performed it first and walked the stage of San Diego State as a phenomenal woman in her presentation. It's interesting that she was such a dynamic person who cared so much about everyone. Everyone she met loved her smile, loved how she graced life. That even in the midst of her many challenges, she still looked up and she still looked forward and she still continued to nurture and care for so many others. Tamil was a child of mine in many ways and a young sister she became. We often talk about how the teacher eventually becomes a student and the mentor becomes eventually the mentee. That was my relationship with Tamil Porter, Dr. Tamil Shekinah Porter. It's interesting that in all of her challenges, and the many people she met throughout the world. She was always concerned about security and safety for so many, and yet she always took new challenges. So about 5 years ago, she moved to Saudi Arabia to become the director of a wellness center at a new university in Kaust. And it was interesting because it was such a dramatic shift in terms of culture for her, change. And yet she embraced that new experience to learn more about herself on the Red Sea. And she consistently wrote to all of us about her new challenges each and every day, always sharing her life, always sharing her challenges, and always giving us inspiration. She came down with breast cancer about 2 years ago, the triple threat breast cancer that black women get. And she embraced that not with the bitterness, but she embraced it because she knew that God was teaching her something about herself and her challenge in life. And she came to Sacramento, and we met together and talked during this time of challenge. And she was always positive and always optimistic that things would be great. It came back to her in the fall, and she met me in South Africa. And I didn't even know that she had just finished her last round of chemo. And she met my staff and all of us who traveled with her and inspired everyone she met by her vision of them and what they could do to be healthy and to love life and to embrace it. So when she became ill a few weeks ago, I was on this floor and I was noticed that I needed to come see her. So I went to Los Angeles to Cedars of Sinai to see Tamil, whose cancer had metastasized to her spine and to her brain. And I went through therapy with her, and I saw her fighting for life because she loved it so much, but also resigned to the fact that if it was the will of God, she could accept it. And so this wonderful young woman is now passed on to the ancestors. We grieve her passing, but we all are so much stronger because we knew her. I'm often reminded of what Maya Angelou says, that when life is all over and the dinosaurs have all left this earth, 3 things remain. She says it's the rock, the river, and the tree. And I think about Tamil because she was truly a rock that so many stood on. So many friends, so many clients, so many individuals stood on her strength. She surely was a river, because a river is where you build cities next to, because new information and new ideas go up and down the river. And she was a person who was constantly sharing this information with so many. And then she, as this 6-foot-tall woman, some says tall as a cypress, I say strong as an oak, who could spread her arms and provide shelter and comfort and care for so many. So I ask you today that we adjourn in memory of a woman that I knew and had the fortunate pleasure to mentor, to love, and to support for over 40 years, Tamil Shekinah Porter, Dr. Porter, who has left this earth, but her impact is still felt every day. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Weber. Mr. Holden, you are also recognized. It's okay. Okay, at this time, our final adjourned memory will be by Mr. Ridley Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, colleagues. I rise to ask that this assembly adjourn in memory of B.B. King, the emperor of the Beale Street Blues. I became acquainted with B.B. King's music at a young age when my mother won an auction at the California State University Northridge's Phenomenal Woman Award. My mother was a recipient of the award, a much-deserved honor, and wanted to support the cause. So she bid on a complete set of B.B. King's catalog at that time, and I was the beneficiary of her investment. I was roughly 9 and came to love the music of the King of the Blues and his guitar Lucille, right from his 1949 single Miss Martha King until his compilation albums later in his career. My favorite B.B. King song was titled Why I Sing the Blues. In the song, King recounts why slavery, poverty, affordable housing, homelessness, the welfare system, education, outsourcing, mental health, and ageism inspired him to sing the blues. Those realities truly do inspire me to serve the people of South, Southwest, and West Los Angeles in this body. Other special singles are the well-known The Thrill Is Gone, I Think You Made Your Move Too Soon, Better Not Look Down, and Inflation Blues. B.B. King had a voice for social critique and commentary that I appreciate dearly. While I cannot claim to be an aficionado of the man or his music, I would simply assert that similar to many in the district I have the privilege of representing, and indeed many Californians, I am a devotee of King, his music, its universality, particularly a man in his music as an outlet of sorrow and expression for deep human longings for reconciliation, healing, and peace. This inspirational and prolific blues singer, songwriter, and guitarist passed away May 14th at the age of 89. Thank you, Mr. Speaker and colleagues, for allowing me to joining me in honoring the memory of B.B. King.
Mr. Alejo.
Also, just members, just want to add my condolences to a great blues player, great blues singer, who had the privilege to meet at the Santa Cruz Blues Festival just back in 2009. And for many of us, many different communities were able to enjoy his great music, a person with a remarkable story who overcame a lot of odds growing up in Mississippi, but became one of the greatest legends of blues music. And anyone who ever stood in a concert to hear him play that guitar, hear him sing and rock with this whole band, you were left with an experience you will never forget for the rest of your life. And for many of us, many in the Latino community learned to appreciate this remarkable man who is a genius of the blues music, and it's a sad chapter in our country to lose such a great musician.
Members, please bring names to the desk to be printed in the journal. Our requests to adjourn in memory will be deemed read and printed in the journal. Moving to announcements, colleagues, tomorrow we have one of our colleagues who will be experiencing the midpoint of his 5th decade, celebrating his 45th birthday, our colleague from Rancho Cucamonga. Happy birthday to Mr. Steinworth. And with that, our schedule of session is as follows. On Tuesday, May the 19th, check-in session. Wednesday, May the 20th, check-in session. Thursday, May 21st, check-in session. Friday, May 22nd, floor session at 9 a.m. At this time, all other items remaining will be passed and retained. All motions shall be continued. Seeing and hearing no further business, I'm ready to entertain a motion to adjourn. Mr. Holden moves, and Ms. Olson seconds that this House stands adjourned until Friday, May the 22nd at 9 a.m. Quorum call is lifted.